At 0843 hours on April 7, 1945. Gunner's Mate Second Class Robert Chen stood on the deck of USS Samuel B. Roberts, a destroyer escort displacing 1,400 tons, watching the largest battleship ever constructed emerge from morning haze 4 miles distant. The battleship Yamato, 72,000 tons, 9 18-inch guns. Each shell weighed 3,200 pounds. One hit would cut Roberts in half. The morning air smelled of salt spray and gun oil. Roberts's engines vibrated the deck at flank speed, 28 knots. Chen could hear the carrier Fanshawe Bay behind them, her escorts calling out radar contacts. The sound of Yamato's turbines carried across the water, a low rumble that felt wrong. Too big. Too powerful. The kind of sound that made your chest tighten because you understood what it meant. Yamato's pagoda mast broke through the mist like a cathedral rising from fog. Chen watched the battleship's forward turret train toward Roberts. 3 guns, each barrel 65 feet long. The math ran through his head automatically. Range, 4 miles. Yamato's maximum effective range, 12 miles. Roberts's maximum effective range against battleship armor, 0 miles. Destroyer escorts did not damage battleships. They died trying. Behind Roberts, 6 escort carriers carried 400 aircraft, supporting 10,000 Marines on Leyte beaches. If Roberts ran, Yamato would sink those carriers. If Roberts attacked, Roberts would sink. The equation had no good solution. Only bad options and worse options. Chen had joined the Navy 3 years ago, December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. He was 20 years old then, working in his father's fireworks shop on Grant Avenue in San Francisco's Chinatown. Chen's Fireworks Emporium. 3 generations of Chen family knowledge about combustion, chemistry, smoke effects. His father had taught him that smoke was not just visual obstruction. Smoke was chemistry. Carbon particles suspended in hot air. Density depended on combustion temperature. Opacity depended on particle size. Color depended on chemical composition. The Navy taught Chen gunnery, taught him how to maintain 5-inch guns, load ammunition, calculate firing solutions. But the Navy never taught him what his father knew. That smoke could be a weapon if you understood what made it work. The problem was simple and fatal. Yamato carried 147 rounds of 18-inch ammunition. Roberts had 5 5-inch guns with 300 rounds total. Yamato's armor belt was 16 inches of hardened steel. Roberts's 5-inch shells could not penetrate Yamato's armor at any range. Yamato could destroy Roberts from 12 miles away. Roberts could not damage Yamato from any distance. Standard destroyer escort doctrine against battleships had 4 words: run, deploy smokescreen, evade, survive, never engage. The engagement calculus was clear. Destroyer escorts existed to protect convoys from submarines. They hunted U-boats. They dropped depth charges. They did not fight battleships. They died fighting battleships. By April 1945, the Pacific War had generated statistics on destroyer escort versus battleship engagements. 0 destroyer escorts had survived direct combat with capital ships. 0. The sample size was 12 engagements across 3 years. 12 destroyer escorts met battleships. 12 destroyer escorts sank. Average survival time, 3 minutes, 20 seconds. The longest survival time was 7 minutes. USS Johnston at Leyte Gulf 6 months ago. Johnston had attacked the Japanese center force. Johnston had fired every torpedo, every shell. Johnston had been hit by 3 battleships and 4 cruisers simultaneously. Johnston sank with 186 crew aboard. The human cost at the Battle off Samar had already reached critical levels. USS Hole sank at 08:55 hours that morning, 48 minutes ago. Destroyed by battleship gunfire. 253 crew, 18 survived. USS Johnston engaged at 07:20 hours, sank at 09:45 hours. 327 crew, 141 survived. Now Roberts was the last destroyer escort between Yamato and 6 carriers. Roberts's captain, Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, ordered attack. The order came over the speaker at 08:44 hours. All ahead flank, close to torpedo range. All guns prepare for surface action. Nobody responded. What could you say? The captain knew the statistics. Everyone knew the statistics. Roberts would close to torpedo range at 6,000 yards, 3.4 miles. Roberts would launch torpedoes. Roberts would probably die. Yamato would continue toward the carriers. Nothing would change, except Roberts would be gone. Chen had a different idea. Robert Chen was 23 years old. Born San Francisco, 1921. His father, Chen Wei, had immigrated from Guangdong province in 1896. Built the fireworks business from nothing. Taught Robert chemistry from age 12, how to mix potassium nitrate and sulfur for specific burn rates, how to create colored flame with strontium for red, barium for green, copper for blue, how to generate smoke for dragon dance performances during Chinese New Year. Dense white smoke using zinc powder and hexachlorothane. Colored smoke using dye compounds and potassium chlorate. Black smoke using diesel fuel and cottonseed oil. That last one mattered now. Chen had enlisted December 8, 1941. Passed basic training at Naval Station Great Lakes. Applied for gunnery school because shooting things seemed straightforward. Graduated top 15% of his class. Not because of accuracy, because of speed. Chen could acquire targets faster than anyone else. His instructors asked how. Chen said he watched where targets would be, not where they were. Predicted movement, fired ahead of position. The principle was simple. Anticipate, don't react. The Navy assigned Chen to Roberts, January 1944, 15 months ago. He knew every system on this ship, knew the guns, the ammunition hoists, the fire control systems, and he knew the smoke generators. Standard Navy smoke generators produced white phosphorus-based screening smoke, effective at distance for hiding ship movements during tactical maneuvers. White smoke created a wall between friendly ships and enemy observers, prevented accurate range finding at 5,000 yards and beyond. But white smoke had problems. It dispersed quickly in wind. It was translucent. Light passed through gaps in the smoke particles. Japanese rangefinders could track targets through white smoke if they were patient. Waited for gaps. Calculated positions from brief visual contacts. Yamato's fire control systems relied on optical rangefinders for accuracy. The Japanese had excellent optics. 12-meter rangefinders mounted above the bridge. Stereoscopic systems that calculated range from the parallax between 2 observation points. Accurate to 50 yards at 12 miles. But optical rangefinders required visible light. Blocked the light spectrum completely, and the rangefinders failed. Radar could provide backup fire control, but radar targeting was less accurate without visual confirmation of impact points. Force Yamato to fire blind, and Yamato's legendary accuracy degraded significantly. Chen wanted black smoke. Dense black smoke. The kind that blocked visible light completely. The kind that created 95% opacity at 100 yards. The kind his father used for theatrical effects during festival performances. Petroleum-based combustion. Diesel fuel mixed with heavy oil, burned incompletely to produce carbon particle smoke so dense you could not see your hand at arm's length. The problem was, Roberts did not carry equipment to generate dense black smoke. Standard smoke generators used chemical compounds designed for white screening smoke. Hexachloroethane and zinc oxide. Clean burning. Low carbon content. Optimized for distance screening, not close engagement opacity. Chen needed something different, something that burned dirty, burned hot, created petroleum-based smoke density. He found it at 0840 hours. 3 minutes ago, Roberts's fuel bunkers held diesel fuel for the ship's propulsion. The engine room also had 40 gallons of waste oil in disposal tanks. Used oil from engine maintenance, contaminated with metal particles, carbon buildup, combustion residue, useless for propulsion, perfect for smoke generation. Chen went to the engine room, found 3 sailors working damage control preparations. Machinists mate second class Thomas Kelly, age 25, from Boston. Fireman, first class Daniel Park, age 21, from Los Angeles. Seaman first class James Morrison, age 19, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Chen knew them, had worked with them for 15 months. Good sailors, competent. More importantly, they were pragmatic. They understood survival mattered more than regulations. Chen explained his plan. Bypass standard smoke generator chemical tanks. Pump diesel fuel mixed with waste oil through smoke generator nozzles. Modify ignition system to burn fuel incompletely, creating dense black petroleum smoke. Estimate: smoke wall 100 feet high, 300 feet wide. Duration: 12 minutes of continuous generation before fuel reserves exhausted. Kelly asked the first question. Does this violate regulations? Chen said yes. Violated 3 regulations: unauthorized modification of safety equipment, using diesel fuel for non-propulsion purposes during combat, bypassing engineered smoke generation systems without authorization from Bureau of Ships, potential court-martial for all 4 men if they survived. Park asked the second question. Does it work? Chen said probably. He had seen his father do similar smoke effects for 30 years. Different scale. Same chemistry. Incomplete combustion of petroleum products produced dense carbon particle smoke. Should work if they got the fuel mixture right. Should work if ignition system fired properly. Should work if fuel lines did not clog. Morrison asked the third question. How long to set it up? Chen calculated. 8 minutes if they worked fast, 10 minutes if they were careful. They did not have 10 minutes. Yamato would reach effective firing range in 7 minutes. Kelly looked at the other 2. Park nodded. Morrison nodded. No formal discussion, no vote. They understood the math. Roberts was going to die in 7 minutes using standard white smoke. Roberts might survive 12 minutes using black smoke. Maybe survive was better than definitely die. Kelly said 2 words. Let's go. They started modifications at 0844 hours. The timeline was brutal. Yamato's approach speed, 24 knots. Current distance, 3.8 miles. Time to effective firing range, 7 minutes. Roberts's speed, 28 knots, closing for torpedo launch. Torpedo launch range, 6,000 yards, 3.4 miles. Time to reach launch range, 4 minutes. The installation timeline was worse. Kelly had to disconnect chemical smoke tank feeds, required removing access panels, disconnecting quarter-inch chemical lines, installing half-inch fuel lines. Estimated time, 3 minutes. Park had to run fuel lines from diesel bunker to smoke generator pumps. Required routing lines through bulkhead penetrations, installing shutoff valves, testing for leaks. Estimated time, 2 minutes. Morrison had to fabricate ignition system from engine spark plugs. Standard ignition used electric heating elements. Battery backup insufficient. Needed spark gap ignition. Estimated time, 3 minutes. Chen had to calculate fuel mixture ratios for maximum smoke density. Required testing combustion with small samples, measuring smoke opacity, adjusting air mixture. Estimated time, 2 minutes. Total time required, 10 minutes. Time available, 7 minutes. They would have to work simultaneously. No safety checks. No procedure verification. Just install and hope. Captain Copeland's voice came over the speaker system. All hands, this is the captain. We are making a torpedo run against battleship Yamato. I know what the odds are. I know what doctrine says. I also know 6 carriers behind us are depending on whatever time we can buy them. Every minute we survive is 1 minute those carriers gain distance. We will close to torpedo range. We will launch. We will engage with guns, and we will make Yamato remember this ship. That is all. The speaker clicked off. Nobody in the engine room spoke. They understood what the captain did not say. Roberts would not survive this engagement. But Roberts could buy time. Time for carriers to escape. Time for aircraft to attack the Japanese fleet. Time measured in minutes and paid for in lives. Chen looked at his 3 sailors. Kelly was already pulling access panels off the smoke generator housing. Park was connecting fuel line sections from the parts locker. Morrison was disassembling 2 spark plugs from the spare parts cabinet. They worked without speaking, without hesitation. 4 sailors modifying a system they had no authorization to modify. Breaking regulations that existed for good reasons, risking explosion, risking fire, risking court-martial, but also risking nothing, because in 7 minutes they would be dead anyway. 08:51 hours. Yamato opened fire. First salvo. 3 18-inch shells from forward turret. Time of flight, 42 seconds. The sound reached Roberts before the shells landed. Low rumble that built to a rising scream. The shells hit water 200 yards short of Roberts. 3 water columns rose 150 feet into the air. The shockwave hit Roberts like a physical blow. The ship shuddered. Morrison fell, hit his head against a bulkhead, kept working. Chen calculated revised timeline. Next salvo, 90 seconds. Current distance to Yamato, 3.4 miles. Time to torpedo range, 4 minutes. They had 4 minutes to finish modifications before Roberts reached launch point. The captain would order torpedo launch with or without smoke cover. With white smoke, Roberts would die in 3 minutes. With black smoke, Roberts might buy 12 minutes. Might was better than nothing. Kelly finished fuel line connections. Park opened the valve. 70 gallons per minute diesel waste oil mixture began flowing towards smoke generator nozzles. Morrison positioned himself at the ignition station, hand on manual toggle switch. Chen verified air intake ratio by watching fuel spray patterns through an inspection port. The mixture looked right, smelled right. Diesel and burnt oil and combustion residue. 08:56 hours, system complete. Chen called bridge on sound-powered phone. Fire control, this is engine room. We have modified smoke generation capability. What modification? The fire control officer's voice was tense. Dense black smoke, petroleum-based, visual opacity greater than 90%. Pause. Is this authorized? Chen hesitated, then told the truth. No, sir. But it works. Another pause, longer. Chen could hear other voices on the bridge, could hear the captain asking questions. Then the captain's voice directly. Engine room, this is the captain. Stand by for my order to deploy smoke. Aye, sir, standing by. Morrison's hand tightened on the ignition toggle. Park double-checked fuel pressure. Kelly secured access panels. Chen calculated one final time. Fuel flow rate, 70 gallons per minute. Burn rate at 60% air mixture. 12 minutes continuous operation. Smoke density, Estimated 95% opacity, based on his father's demonstrations, scaled up for volume. Either this worked, or they died trying. 0857 hours, 15 seconds. Roberts reached 2.7 miles from Yamato. Torpedo range. The captain's voice came through the speaker. Torpedo room, prepare to launch. Engine room, deploy your smoke now. Morrison flipped the toggle switch. The spark gap fired. Blue-white flash inside the generator chamber. Diesel fuel ignited. The sound was immediate. Deep whoosh like an industrial furnace. 3 seconds while combustion stabilized. Then black smoke erupted from Roberts's stern. Dense, opaque, petroleum black. Rose 120 feet above the water, spread 300 feet wide in Roberts's wake. Yamato disappeared behind the smoke wall. Chen watched through the engine room porthole. Could not see through the smoke at 10 yards. Could not see Yamato at all. The black smoke hung low over the water, dispersed slowly, exactly like his father's festival smoke, exactly like chemistry predicted. Roberts launched torpedoes, 3 Mark 15 torpedoes, 460 pounds explosive each. Running time, 2 minutes 40 seconds at 46 knots. Roberts turned hard to port, retreated into her own smoke screen. Yamato's 4th salvo landed where Roberts had been. 9 shells from all 3 turrets, all missed. Yamato's fire control had lost visual tracking. Chen's black smoke bought them exactly what they needed. Time to launch torpedoes and evade. Whether the torpedoes hit Yamato was now up to physics and luck. Whether Roberts survived the next 12 minutes was up to how long the smoke lasted and how well Yamato adapted. But for now, for this moment, Roberts was still alive. 4 sailors had broken regulations and created something the Navy manual never imagined. Black smoke thick enough to blind a battleship. The question was whether blind luck would be enough against 72,000 tons of Japanese steel. 0859 hours. Roberts maneuvered inside her own black smoke screen. Visibility was 0, feet beyond the smoke wall. Navigation by compass and speed calculation alone. The captain ordered maintain flank speed, random course changes every 30 seconds. Standard evasion doctrine. Make yourself unpredictable. Force the enemy to guess where you will be. Chen stood in the engine room watching fuel pressure gauges. 72 gallons per minute flowing through the smoke generator system. Temperature inside the combustion chamber, 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Black smoke pouring from the stern in a continuous wall. The system was working. Better than working. The smoke density exceeded Chen's calculations. His father would have been proud. But systems that worked also broke. At 0900 hours, 2 minutes after torpedo launch, the first problem appeared. Battery voltage was dropping. 11 volts when they started. Now 9.7 volts. Morrison's spark gap required minimum 9 volts for reliable ignition. Below 9 volts, the spark would weaken. Combustion would become intermittent. Smoke generation would fail. Park saw the voltage gauge drop. We're losing ignition power. Morrison checked the battery connections. Batteries draining faster than expected. Spark gap pulls more current than calculated. Chen did the math. 9.7 volts now. Estimated drain rate, 0.2 volts per minute. Time until system failure, 3.5 minutes. They had promised 12 minutes of smoke generation. Reality was delivering 3.5 minutes. The difference between promise and reality was the difference between Roberts surviving and Roberts dying. Kelly had the solution. Increase fuel flow rate. Higher fuel volume means hotter combustion. Hotter combustion means easier ignition with weaker spark. Park shook his head. Higher fuel flow reduces duration. We'll burn through reserves in 4 minutes instead of 12. 4 minutes with working smoke beats 8 minutes with failed smoke, Kelly said. Chen agreed. He adjusted the fuel flow valve, 72 gallons per minute to 90 gallons per minute. The combustion chamber temperature jumped to 950 degrees. The smoke coming from the stern turned darker, thicker, more carbon particles per cubic foot of air. The voltage stabilized at 9.4 volts. Still dropping, but slower. Revised timeline, 4 minutes of smoke generation remaining. Maybe 5 if battery held longer than calculated. Roberts had bought 2 minutes so far. Needed at least 10 more minutes for carriers to reach safe distance from Yamato's guns. The math still did not work. But the math had never worked. 0902 hours. Roberts' sonar operator called from the bridge. Torpedo impact, torpedo impact. Single explosion bearing 045 degrees. One of Roberts' 3 torpedoes had hit something. Chen heard cheering from other compartments. The torpedo had hit Yamato. A destroyer escort's torpedo had damaged the largest battleship ever constructed. The crew understood what that meant. They had hurt the giant. Maybe not killed it, but hurt it. The tactical result mattered more than the emotional victory. Yamato slowed to 18 knots. The battleship had to assess damage, had to verify hull integrity, had to determine if flooding was controlled. That assessment would take time, 5 minutes minimum, maybe 10. Every minute Yamato spent checking damage was 1 minute carriers gained distance. Roberts had already bought 7 minutes. The torpedo added 5 more, 12 minutes total. Exactly what Chen had promised. But Yamato was not done fighting. 0904 hours. Yamato cleared Roberts' smokescreen by maneuvering northwest. Wind from the northeast at 12 knots pushed the smokescreen southwest. Yamato went around it, reached clear air, spotted Roberts emerging from the smokescreen's western edge. Range, 4.2 miles. Outside Roberts' effective gun range. Inside Yamato's effective range. Yamato's forward turret trained on Roberts. The massive guns elevated, traversed, locked on target. Captain Copeland made a decision that violated every destroyer escort doctrine in the Navy manual. Instead of running, Roberts would engage Yamato with guns. 5-inch guns that could not penetrate Yamato's armor. Guns that were useless against a battleship. But guns that could still annoy. All guns, commence firing, Copeland ordered. Target Yamato's superstructure. Make them think about us instead of the carriers. Roberts' 5-inch guns opened fire at maximum elevation. Range, 4.3 miles. Extreme range for 5-inch guns. Accuracy was terrible, but volume mattered. 15 rounds per minute per gun, 75 rounds per minute total. Shells arcing high, falling near Yamato's bridge. No damage to armor, but close enough to make Yamato's crew nervous. Close enough to force evasive maneuvers. Yamato returned fire at 0906 hours. 9 18-inch shells, all 3 turrets. This was not ranging fire. This was annihilation fire. Time of flight, 48 seconds. Roberts maneuvered hard, deployed the remaining black smoke. The smoke screen was thinner now. Battery voltage at 8.9 volts. Spark gap barely maintaining ignition. But the smoke still provided some visual obstruction. Degraded Yamato's firing solution slightly. 8 shells missed. Fell in a line ahead and astern of Roberts. Near misses. Close enough that shrapnel peppered Roberts' superstructure. Close enough that the captain felt the pressure wave in his lungs. The 9th shell did not miss. 3,200 pounds of armor-piercing steel, traveling at 2,000 feet per second, hit Roberts amidships on the starboard side. The shell was designed to penetrate battleship armor. 16-inch steel plates. Roberts had no armor. The shell passed through Roberts' hull like tissue paper. Entered starboard side. Exited port side. Created an entry hole 4 feet in diameter. An exit hole 6 feet in diameter. The shell did not explode. Armor-piercing fuses required thick armor to trigger the detonation mechanism. Against thin destroyer escort plating, the fuse never activated. The shell was a solid projectile, but kinetic energy at that velocity did not need explosives. The shell passed directly through Roberts' engine room. Kelly was standing near the starboard bulkhead when the shell entered. He saw the metal wall disintegrate, saw daylight where solid steel had been, saw the shell itself for maybe 1/10 of a second, a massive shape moving too fast to process. Then the shell hit the port boiler. The boiler was pressurized to 600 pounds per square inch, filled with superheated steam at 750 degrees. The shell ruptured the boiler casing. 3,000 gallons of superheated steam exploded into the engine room in less than 2 seconds. Kelly died instantly, crushed by the collapsing bulkhead before the steam reached him. Small mercy. Better than burning. Park was near the fuel manifold. He saw the shell hit, saw the boiler rupture, tried to run. The steam caught him before he made 3 steps. 750-degree steam flash boiled the moisture in his lungs. He was dead before his body hit the deck. 21 years old, from Los Angeles. Had planned to study engineering after the war. His parents would receive a telegram in 3 days. Regret to inform you. Killed in action, heroically serving his country. Morrison was at the ignition station near the forward bulkhead. The steam blast threw him against the wall, broke 3 ribs, fractured his left arm. But the forward bulkhead protected him from the worst of the steam. He was alive, injured, trapped, but alive. The engine room was filling with steam and smoke. Temperature over 200 degrees. Morrison could not see, could barely breathe. He felt for the bulkhead, found the door handle, tried to turn it. The handle was jammed. Warped metal from the shell impact. He pulled, pushed. The door would not move. He heard someone shouting from outside. Chen's voice. "Morrison! Morrison, can you hear me?" Morrison tried to respond. His voice was barely a whisper, smoke inhalation. His lungs felt like they were full of glass. "Here. I'm here." Chen must have heard. The door handle rattled from outside. Chen was trying to force it open. Morrison could hear metal scraping, could hear Chen cursing, could hear other voices. Sailors helping Chen try to force the door. The temperature kept rising. Morrison's skin was blistering. He slid down the bulkhead to the deck. Cooler air near the floor. He tried to stay conscious, tried to stay focused. He could still see the ignition switch from where he sat. 3 feet away. The toggle was still in the on position. The spark gap was still firing. He could hear it. Click, click, click. Regular rhythm. Battery voltage must be holding. The smoke system was still working. That mattered. That mattered more than anything. Chen's voice came through the bulkhead again. "Morrison, we're going to get you out. Hold on." Morrison wanted to respond. Wanted to tell Chen not to waste time. Wanted to tell Chen to keep the smoke system running. That was more important than one sailor. But he could not make his voice work. His throat was burned. His lungs were failing. He focused on the ignition switch, watched the spark gap fire. Click, click, click. As long as that sound continued, the smoke system worked. As long as the smoke system worked, Roberts had a chance. Outside the engine room, Chen and 3 other sailors were trying to force the door with pry bars. The door was warped from heat and impact damage. The frame was bent. They could not get leverage, could not force it open. One of the sailors said what everyone was thinking. "We need cutting equipment, acetylene torch." That's in damage control forward, 10-minute round trip. Chen looked at the engine room door, felt the heat radiating through the steel, looked at the temperature gauge on the bulkhead. 240 degrees inside. Morrison had maybe 5 minutes before heat stroke killed him. They did not have 10 minutes. Chen made a decision. Get the torch. Move. The sailor ran forward. Chen stayed at the door, kept talking to Morrison, kept telling him help was coming, kept lying about the timeline, kept Morrison focused on staying alive. Inside the engine room, Morrison heard Chen's voice, heard the promise of rescue. He knew Chen was lying, knew the timeline did not work, but he appreciated the effort. Chen was a good sailor, a good friend. Morrison wished he could tell Chen that the smoke modification was brilliant, that Kelly and Park died making it work, that their deaths bought time for 6 carriers and 400 aircraft and 10,000 Marines. But Morrison could not speak. He focused on breathing, one breath at a time, tried to count the spark gap clicks, tried to stay conscious, tried to matter for as long as possible. 0908 hours. Roberts's propulsion failed. Both boilers destroyed. No steam pressure, no engine power. Roberts went dead in the water. The ship's momentum carried her forward for another 200 yards, then stopped. Roberts wallowed in the swells. No power, no maneuverability. A stationary target. The captain ordered abandon ship. All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill. Abandon ship immediately. The crew began evacuating. Life rafts deployed. Sailors jumped overboard. The water was warm, tropical. Philippines in April. The ocean temperature was 82 degrees. Men could survive in water that warm for hours. If they were not wounded. If they were not in shock. If Japanese ships did not machine gun survivors in the water. Chen heard the abandoned ship order. Looked at the engine room door. The torch team had not returned. Morrison was still inside, still alive. Chen could hear him coughing through the bulkhead. Chen called through the door. Morrison, abandoned ship order. I have to go. I'm sorry. Morrison heard, understood. He tried to respond, managed one word. Go. Chen hesitated. Every instinct said, stay. Find a way through the door. Get Morrison out. But the ship was sinking. The list to port was increasing. Roberts had maybe 10 minutes before she went under. Chen would die if he stayed. He put his hand on the door, felt the heat through his palm. The smoke worked. We bought them time. No response from inside. Morrison might be unconscious, might be dead. Chen would never know. Chen ran topside, jumped overboard. The water was shockingly warm after the cold air. He swam away from Roberts, looked back at the ship. Black smoke still trailed from the stern. The system was still working. Even with Kelly dead, even with Park dead, even with Morrison dying. The unauthorized modification that violated 3 Navy regulations was still generating smoke that blocked Yamato's targeting. 0920 hours. Yamato ceased fire. The battleship turned northwest. Admiral Kurita had ordered center force to withdraw. Too many air attacks, too many damaged cruisers, too much time wasted on stubborn American escorts. The carriers had escaped. The mission had failed. Yamato left Roberts to sink. Did not waste ammunition finishing her. Roberts was already dead. Just had not admitted it yet. Chen floated in the water. Watched Roberts list further to port. Watched the black smoke thin as fuel pressure finally failed. The smoke generator sputtered, stopped. The spark gap clicked one final time. Then silence. Roberts rolled onto her port side at 0945 hours. The American flag was still flying from the mast. The last thing Chen saw before Robert slipped beneath the surface was that flag, red, white, and blue, against black smoke and gray sky. USS Samuel B. Roberts sank in 1,800 feet of water, taking Kelly and Park and Morrison and 115 others down with her. 89 crew survived. One destroyer escort had fought the largest battleship ever constructed for 22 minutes and bought enough time for 6 carriers to escape. Chen floated in the warm water, waiting for rescue. His hands smelled like diesel fuel and smoke. His father's fireworks chemistry had worked, had saved lives, had changed nothing and everything. Morrison died in the engine room 3 minutes after Roberts sank. Drowned when water flooded the compartment. He was 19 years old, from Oklahoma, would never see Oklahoma again. The spark gap he had maintained kept firing until the battery finally died at 0943 hours. 2 minutes before Roberts sank. Morrison stayed at his post for 27 minutes after the abandoned ship order. Stayed because the ignition switch was there. Because someone had to make sure the smoke kept generating. Because that mattered more than one sailor's life. That was how innovation actually worked in war. 4 sailors broke regulations. 3 died making it work. 1 survived to tell the story nobody wanted to hear. General quarters sounded at 0630 hours. 7 short blasts, continuous ringing. 263 men ran to battle stations. Abel's engines pushed from 15 knots to 35 knots in 4 minutes. The deck vibrated. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lieutenant Thomas Bradley watched gauges climb into the red. Temperature rising above normal operating limits. 4 boilers at maximum pressure. Bradley calculated they could maintain flank speed for 90 minutes before risking catastrophic failure. When Parker's order came through, Bradley's response was simple. Engines will hold. Let's make it count. Gun crews reached their stations. 5 5-inch guns, 54-pound shells. Gun 1 forward, commanded by Petty Officer Raymond Mitchell with a 6-man crew. Guns 2 and 3 amidships, port and starboard. Guns 4 and 5 aft, under Lieutenant Junior Grade William Foster. Total ammunition, 1,800 rounds. At maximum rate of fire, they'd empty the magazines in 32 minutes. In the Fire Control Director, Westholm's team assembled. Morrison on the rangefinder, already tracking Yamato optically as the distance closed. Russo at the plotting table, translating Westholm's notebook calculations into firing solutions. Chen on communications, ready to relay data to the gun mounts. Westholm on the director controls. He would aim all 5 guns simultaneously. Parker made one announcement over the 1MC. This is the captain. We have detected the Japanese battleship Yamato heading for our invasion fleet. Air support is unavailable. We are going to engage. Our fire control team has identified a vulnerability in the battleship's main battery. If their calculations are correct, we have a chance. If not, we've bought the fleet 90 minutes. Man your stations. Do your jobs. That's all. No cheering, no protests, no panic. Morrison glanced at Westholm. Your math better be right? Westholm kept his eyes on the director controls. It is. Oil smoke poured from Abeli's stacks as the engines reached maximum output. Salt spray crashed over the bow as the destroyer accelerated into a 15-knot headwind. The smell of fuel and ocean filled the ship. At 0632 hours, range was 24,000 yards. Abel's speed, 35 knots. Yamato's speed, 25 knots. Combined closing speed, 60 knots, approximately 1 mile per minute. Time to engagement range, 20 minutes. Westholm updated his firing solution every 30 seconds. Target bearing constant at 350 degrees. Abe was on a collision course. Target speed, 25 knots. Target course, 180 degrees, directly toward Okinawa. Predicted optimal firing position, 4,000 yards, relative bearing 345 degrees, 15 degrees to port of head-on. The approach angle would maintain position in the main battery blind spot while allowing all 5 of Abe's guns to bear. At 0637 hours, range dropped to 18,000 yards. Yamato detected Abe on radar. Japanese fire control calculated range and bearing. Identified as destroyer-class vessel. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, commanding Yamato, noted the contact. His assessment, single destroyer, no threat, continued toward Okinawa. No course change ordered. Yamato's main battery remained trained forward. Ito expected air attack, not surface engagement. At 0642 hours, range was 12,000 yards. Yamato's main battery turrets rotated to engage. Number 1 turret forward. 3 18-inch guns rotated to port. Number 2 turret amidships. 3 guns rotated to port. Number 3 turret aft couldn't bear, blocked by the massive superstructure. 6 18-inch guns now pointed directly at Abe. Fire control solution calculated. Range, 12,000 yards, well within maximum effective range. Parker made no evasive maneuvers. Course, 350 degrees, unchanged. Speed, 35 knots, unchanged. Direct approach toward Yamato's bow. Gun crews could see Yamato now. Massive gray shape on the horizon. Distinctive pagoda mast rising like a steel mountain. Enormous main battery turrets rotating toward them with mechanical precision. Gun 1's crew stopped talking. Mitchell's voice was quiet. Jesus, that thing is huge. Foster at guns 4 and 5. Steady. We get 1 shot at this. Make it count. At 0645 hours, range 10,000 yards. Yamato opened fire. Number 1 and number 2 turrets, 6 18-inch guns, broadside weight, 19,200 pounds of shells. Time of flight at 10,000 yards, approximately 18 seconds. Westholm's team heard them coming. The sound was like freight trains in the sky, massive objects tearing through air at supersonic speed. Morrison. Incoming. The first salvo, 6 shells. 3 fell short by 200 yards. 3 passed overhead by 300 feet. Water columns from the short shells rose higher than Abe's mast. 180 feet of white water erupting from the ocean. The ship shuddered. Shrapnel peppered the hull like hail on tin. No direct hits. Parker's voice on the intercom. Steady as she goes. Abe's course, unchanged. Range, closing at 1 mile per minute. At 0646 hours, range 8,000 yards. This was the threshold in Westholm's calculations. Inside 8,000 yards, Yamato's main battery depression angle became critical. At current relative bearing and closing speed, Abe would enter the blind spot in 90 seconds. But first they had to survive 90 seconds of accurate main battery fire. Yamato's second salvo came at 0646 hours. 6 guns. Corrected for the fall of the first salvo. Japanese fire control was among the best in the world. Time of flight, approximately 15 seconds. 3 shells struck within 50 yards of Abe. 1 to port, 30 yards off the beam. 2 to starboard, 40 and 50 yards off the beam. Water columns engulfed the destroyer. Shock wave from underwater detonations lifted Abe's stern 1 foot out of the water. Hull plating buckled in 3 places. No penetration. But the ship shuddered violently. Light fixtures shattered throughout the vessel. Chen, in the fire control director, was thrown against the bulkhead, cutting his forehead. Blood ran into his eyes. He wiped it away and stayed at his station. Range, 7,000 yards. At 0647 hours, Yamato's third salvo fired. Japanese gunnery officers could see the destroyer clearly now through their optical sights. 6 shells launched. Parker waited until the shells were in flight. Then, all engines back, emergency full, left full rudder. Emergency deceleration and turn. Abel's speed dropped from 35 knots to 22 knots in 10 seconds. The ship heeled 15 degrees to port in the turn, deck plates screaming. Result: third salvo missed ahead. All 6 shells fell 200 yards forward of where Abel would have been. Japanese fire control had calculated for a 35-knot target. Abel's deceleration fooled the solution. Parker's second order: all ahead flank, rudder amidships. Abel accelerated back to 35 knots, resumed course directly toward Yamato. Range: 6,500 yards. Yamato's gun crew prepared a 4th salvo, but the turrets had a problem. Abel was closing rapidly. Current engagement angle required depressing the guns below 5 degrees. Physical limitation. The massive gun barrels couldn't depress that far. The barrels would strike the deck. Turret 1 elevation, 5 degrees, minimum. Turret 2, elevation, 5 degrees, minimum. At 6,000 yards and current approach angle, shells would pass harmlessly over the destroyer. Vice Admiral Ito realized the destroyer was inside his main battery's effective engagement envelope. Ito's order: secondary batteries, engage the destroyer. At 0648 hours, range 6,000 yards. Westholm's voice cut through the chaos. Entering blind spot. Now, all guns commence firing. At 0648 hours and 30 seconds, range was 5,500 yards. Abel's 5 5-inch guns opened fire simultaneously. The sound was deafening. Gun 1 forward had a direct line to Yamato's bow. Guns 2 and 3 amidships angled shots at the superstructure. Guns 4 and 5 aft targeted the waterline. Rate of fire: 15 rounds per minute per gun. Total rate of fire: 75 rounds per minute. Every shell weighed 54 pounds. Every shell was high explosive. The first minute, 75 rounds fired. Hit probability at 5,000 yards was approximately 40%. Westholm's calculations proving accurate under combat conditions. Estimated hits: 30 shells. Impact locations: mostly superstructure, some bow, plating, several at the waterline. Damage to Yamato: minimal. Superstructure damage was cosmetic. Some fire control equipment destroyed. Bow plating was scarred but not penetrated. 16 inches of armor held. Waterline hits caused no penetration. 12 inches of armor protected the hull. But the 5-inch shells were disrupting Yamato's secondary fire control. Explosions on deck interfered with rangefinders. Smoke obscured visual tracking. 6-inch gun crews were taking cover from shell fragments. Secondary battery fire was becoming less accurate. Range: 5,000 yards. Parker maneuvered constantly to stay in the main battery blind spot. Course adjustments every 30 seconds, following Westholm's calculations from the notebook with precision. Maintaining position 15 degrees to port of dead ahead, relative to Yamato. Speed varying between 30 and 35 knots to maintain optimal position. The destroyer was threading a needle at 30 knots. Yamato's 6-inch secondary batteries were hitting close, but not direct. Water columns erupted around Abel like a forest of white trees. Several shells passed overhead with a sound like tearing canvas. One shell hit the fantail. Minor damage, no casualties. Metal shrieked. The deck buckled. Damage control teams responded immediately. At 0649 hours, range 4,500 yards. 2 minutes of sustained fire. 150 rounds expended. Gun barrels were heating. Temperature in the gun houses rose above 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Crews were rotating, 4 men loading, 2 men resting every 3 minutes. No one complained. Mitchell at gun 1, sweat running down his face. "We're hitting the biggest ship ever built with pop guns. Keep shooting." Westholm's voice over the intercom. "We're in the sweet spot. Main battery can't depress enough. Secondary batteries can't track us fast enough. Keep firing." The gun crews worked at maximum rate, shells ejecting with a metallic clang, new rounds loading with mechanical precision, firing. The rhythm was hypnotic. Load, fire, load, fire. Brass casings piled up in the gun houses, ankle deep, then knee deep. The air smelled like cordite and hot metal and sweat. At 0650 hours, range 4,000 yards. Time elapsed since first shots, 90 seconds. Rounds fired, 225 shells, 75 per minute for 3 minutes. Abel's ammunition status, 1,575 rounds remaining. Estimated firing time at current rate, 21 minutes until magazines empty. Vice Admiral Ito faced a problem he'd never trained for. Yamato's main battery was useless, couldn't depress enough to hit the destroyer. Secondary batteries were firing, but inaccurate. The destroyer was maneuvering inside their tracking rate. 5-inch anti-aircraft guns could hit surface targets, but their fire control system wasn't optimized for surface engagement. Range was too close for ASU torpedo defense to matter. Abele hadn't even launched torpedoes. The destroyer was simply staying in Yamato's blind spot and shooting. Ito had 3 tactical options. First, turn away, open range, allow main battery to engage. But this meant steaming away from Okinawa, abandoning the mission. Second, continue toward Okinawa, accept destroyer fire. Superstructure damage was accumulating, but not critical. Third, attempt to ram the destroyer. 72,000 tons versus 2,000 tons guaranteed a kill. But the destroyer was faster and more maneuverable. Ito made his decision. Maintain course. All secondary batteries continue engaging destroyer. Report damage. The mission was to beach at Okinawa and use main guns as coastal artillery until destroyed. The destroyer couldn't sink Yamato with 5-inch shells. Eventually, American air power would arrive and sink Yamato anyway. Every minute closer to Okinawa meant more potential damage to American transports. Accept superstructure damage. Press on. Damage reports came into Yamato's bridge. Fire control radar damaged, optical fire control still functional. 2 6-inch gun mounts temporarily out of action. Crews taking cover from shell fragments. Multiple fires on superstructure, damage control teams responding. 3 anti-aircraft gun mounts destroyed. 5-inch shells hitting exposed positions. No flooding, no critical damage. Casualties, 17 men wounded, 4 killed by shell fragments. At 0651 hours, range 3,800 yards. Abel's fire was sustained, methodical, devastating to unarmored targets. Westholm adjusted point of aim every 30 seconds. Targeting sequence, fire control equipment, secondary gun mounts, superstructure, anti-aircraft positions. Morrison on the rangefinder called out hits. Hit on forward superstructure, hit on port secondary turret, hit on pagoda mast. His voice was mechanical, professional, detached. The rhythm continued. Loading, firing, loading, firing. Gun crews operating like machines, shell casings piled higher. Russo plotted new firing solutions as Abele maneuvered. Chen relayed corrections to all 5 gun mounts, his voice steady despite the blood still running from the cut on his forehead. Parker stood on the bridge, eyes locked on Yamato's main battery turrets. As long as those barrels stayed at 5-degree elevation, Abele was relatively safe. If Yamato turned, If range opened, those 18-inch guns would kill them in one salvo. Parker's course corrections were constant, precise, following Westholm's calculations exactly. 14 degrees to port, 15 degrees, 13 degrees. Constant adjustment to maintain the blind spot position. Yamato's secondary battery adapted tactics at 0652 hours. If they couldn't track the destroyer accurately, they'd use area fire. Spread pattern: 8 6-inch guns firing in a pattern 300 yards wide. Theory: saturate the area where the destroyer was maneuvering. One shell might get lucky. Yamato fired a concentrated secondary salvo. 8 6-inch guns. Shells spread across a 300-yard area. Target zone: Abil's predicted position based on current course and speed. Result: near miss, but effective. One shell struck water 10 yards to port. Underwater detonation ruptured hull plating below the waterline. Flooding in forward compartment: not critical but needed immediate attention. Damage control team deployed. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb leading 5 men into the forward compartment. Water was knee-deep and rising. Webb's assessment came over the intercom. "We can control it. Pumps holding. Keep fighting." Parker recognized the new Japanese tactic immediately. Area fire meant staying still was death. Solution: increase maneuver frequency. New orders to helm. Course changes every 20 seconds instead of 30. Harder for Yamato to predict position, but also harder for Abil's guns to maintain accuracy. The trade-off was immediate. Abil's hit rate dropped from 40% to 30%. More maneuvering meant a less stable gun platform. But survival required it. Westholm compensated, adjusting firing solutions for constant motion. Gun crews compensated, firing during brief moments of steady course between turns. At 0653 hours, 4 minutes of sustained combat. Rounds fired, 300 shells. Yamato's damage was accumulating like compound interest. 8 secondary gun mounts damaged or destroyed. 12 anti-aircraft positions destroyed. Fire control radar completely destroyed. Optical rangefinders damaged. Superstructure fires. 5 major, 12 minor. Casualties: 38 wounded, 11 killed. But no critical damage to hull, engines, or main battery. Yamato's fighting capability was reduced approximately 20%. Ship's combat effectiveness was still high. Abile's damage was minimal, but growing. Forward flooding controlled, but ongoing. Bow riding lower, 1 foot down by the head. Speed reduced to 33 knots due to flooding and increased drag. 1 5-inch gun, Gun 3, jamming intermittently due to mechanical issues from sustained firing. Gun crews were exhausted, rotating every 2 minutes now instead of 3. Ammunition expenditure: 17% of total load. Westholm understood the mathematical reality. Abil couldn't sink Yamato. 5-inch shells couldn't penetrate major armor. Best case: disable enough systems to slow Yamato down. Real goal: delay Yamato until air support arrived. Time delay so far: 6 minutes. Target delay: at least 30 more minutes. Yamato's speed was still 25 knots toward Okinawa. Distance to Okinawa anchorage: 43 miles. Time to anchorage: approximately 70 minutes. Air support estimated arrival: 50 minutes. The math was brutal. Abile needed to slow Yamato down or die trying. At 0655 hours, 7 minutes of combat, Westholm made an observation. Yamato's speed was unchanged. Superstructure damage wasn't affecting propulsion. Need to target different systems. But main engines were deep in the hull, protected by 26 inches of armor. 5-inch shells couldn't reach them. Alternative target: rudder and steering gear. Located at stern, below waterline. less armor protection than central hull. If damaged, Yamato couldn't maneuver effectively. The problem? Stern was aft, behind Yamato's massive superstructure. From current position, 15 degrees off Yamato's port bow, stern wasn't visible. To target stern, a Bailey would need to move to Yamato's quarter. Moving to quarter meant leaving the main battery blind spot. Risk. Yamato's turrets could rotate to bear on new position. Westholm calculated. Time required for Yamato to rotate turrets, 90 degrees. Turret rotation rate was 2 degrees per second. 90-degree rotation, 45 seconds. If a Bailey moved to quarter position, stayed for 30 seconds, then returned to blind spot, possible to avoid main battery fire. But no margin for error. Westholm to Parker over the intercom. Captain, request permission to target steering gear. Requires moving out of blind spot for 30 seconds. Parker's response was immediate. How certain are you? Mathematically, 85% certain we can do it without being hit. But it's the only way to slow them down. Parker's decision took 3 seconds. Do it. When? On my mark. I need gun 5 in position. 60 seconds. Russo calculated exact course to stern quarter. New heading, 315 degrees, 45 degrees left of current course. Speed, 35 knots. Time in exposed position, 30 seconds. Distance from Yamato, 3,500 yards. Then emergency turn back to safe position. Heading 015 degrees, 45 degrees right of exposed position.